I'm joined here with Todd MacEwen of CSAI here in Prince Edward Island. Todd, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Why don't you tell the folks what CSAI stands for and what it is?
Well, I work at IRSA, the Immigrant and Refugee Services Association, and late last year we received funding from Commonwealth Sport Canada for a program called the Community Sport for All Initiative, and we are only one of 5 locations across the country running the program. There's 2 in Edmonton, 2 in Toronto, and us. The purpose of the program is largely to identify and, if possible, help eliminate barriers that newcomer youth may encounter trying to enter minor sports or sports within junior and senior high schools. And part of that is research-based, part of that is working directly with our clients and their children and having those discussions with them. And the fun part of the program will be later this year when we're doing a number of try-a-sport days, working with minor associations of different sports throughout the province to have that opportunity for newcomer youth to come in and try baseball, to try basketball, to try tennis if they haven't before, and hopefully help grow the sport, which will benefit everybody in the end.
Let's talk more about those barriers
Yeah.
that some of your clients may be facing. Could you dive deeper into that?
Sure. The biggest barrier that we thought before we started having discussions with focus groups and panels was financial. I would say roughly half the clients who come in looking for assistance registering children for minor sports are looking for financial support or financial aid to help with registration or equipment costs. And there are a couple of provincial and national programs that we help them access. But we assumed that the financial barrier would be a big one. Just again, if you've got more than one child, if you're in more than one sport, those costs do go up, coupled with transportation, coupled with potential travel for teams. So it can run into the several hundred or thousands of dollars. So we help where we can. And so what we started with was that as the baseline, that finance was going to be a big part of it. But then opening the discussion up, we had a facilitator come in from Commonwealth Sport in Ottawa to help lead that discussion. And it turned into a very wide-ranging talk with many of the parents. We did a separate group with the children. And of course the findings were a little bit different, the parents dealing with the real world and the children dealing with their day-to-day experience with sports. Language and culture were other issues that came up. Our clients' capacity for English varies from very little to fluent, with most finding themselves somewhere in the middle of the CLS scale, the English language scale. And so a lot of the youth that we work with were apprehensive about trying a new sport if they weren't familiar with it. Just because there was that fear of not being able to fully comprehend or understand the directions or instructions. And any kid does not want to put themselves in that position where they feel a little bit left out or they feel like they're not keeping up with the rest of the class. They may not be comfortable asking questions or asking for further instruction. So if it's a sport they're not familiar with, many of them will just opt out rather than try it, just because, again, there's the language barrier that they feel may be present. Culture is another thing. Currently there's a couple of Muslim holidays that are being observed now which require fasting from sunup to sunset. And that does become an issue from time to time as well, depending on the time of year that these observances are held. Just because the children may be adherent to the holiday as well and not at their peak physical performance during practices or games if they fall within, say, Ramadan or something like that. So there's cultural sensitivities. Transportation was always a big issue as well. Just, again, if you're dealing with somebody who may not have access to a car, maybe relying on public transportation, may not be comfortable traveling great distances for games or practices. So these were all things that were coming firsthand from the parents, and sort of informed how we'll try to have our program in place through the spring and summer, making it as accessible as possible to everybody.
You keep talking about language, and sports have their own language
Yeah.
themselves. Drive the baseline, hit the basket, run the 2-3. You know, get that C cut and go to the net.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do you facilitate the translation of those sports to some of these players if they come to you for that?
Yeah, it can be difficult depending on the age. I think if we've got children who are in grade 1, 2, or 3, most of the minor sports that are available to them are starting at a base level for everybody. So they're not omitted, they're not left behind. It's not like they haven't played the sport before because everybody's starting that. But we do see a lot of clients coming in who are in the junior high range. This may be their first or second year in Canada. And again, apart from soccer and a couple other sports, soccer, universal, global, everybody knows how to play it. But yeah, some of the more North American sports, such as basketball, such as baseball, such as hockey, picking that up when you haven't played it before, and you've got kids who've been playing it for 5, 6, 7 years in junior or senior high school, that can be difficult. I think any kid with any sort of athletic ability can probably take to most sports. But yeah, there is that hurdle that if they haven't participated in a particular sport before, trying to play it competitively after a certain age does become more difficult.
So let's turn this conversation to you now.
Yeah.
You were born in Halifax, but
Yeah.
you quickly moved within the first year of your life to your
my
parents moved
my
you.
memories of growing up in Halifax are non-existent, but so I was born there just as that distinction that many Islanders still like to draw. So.
Spent the next 17 years of
Yeah.
your life at Colonel Gray High School.
Yep.
And graduated in 87.
Yep.
So how has sports, high school, youth changed? I'm sure many adults have an outlook on this since you graduated.
Just my own experience and being still part of the sports world within the schools and P.E.I. The athletic ability of kids is so much more than I think we had a generation ago. Their awareness of a particular sport has grown. And I think the overall sense of competition has improved. As the athletes improve, the teams improve, and when teams improve, they do become more competitive. So I would think if you took a high school basketball team from 1987 and put it against a high school basketball team today, today's team would probably wipe the floor with them, I think.
So let's go back to something you said.
Yeah.
Awareness.
Yeah.
Both on the court and in the locker room. Things are being said throughout the game, throughout practices, throughout the social moments with the team.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been a change in that aspect as well.
I think within Prince Edward Island, we've always been sort of the last in the country for a lot of things, and I think certainly for the growth of diversity within schools and sports, we're probably we may be one of the fastest growing, but we're probably the last to get started in recognizing and seeing that growth as it is today compared to Ontario, BC, who've been dealing with this for decades. Most of the schools across the province have anywhere from 10 to 30% newcomer and immigrant youth. So the makeup of the school is changing. And as we're seeing the types of individuals and youth participating in minor sports, both within schools and outside of the schools, is changing to some degree. I think some of the sports just may not be that accessible or may not be of interest to some. They may not have the experience or background playing them. But they are always looking to grow. They're always looking to expand, to get more people involved in sports. So I think a lot of the sports associations are doing what they can to attract as many new participants into the sport, with the idea that we do have this growing diverse population on hand within the province.
Looking at how racism has changed through those years, it's very different as well. You know, there's not as much deep-seated hate, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's what you see on first glance.
Yeah.
But to see race itself and to drive something from that,
Yeah.
I would imagine is a little tricky.
It can be. It can be. Within our association, at the moment, we have got 3 staff members who do presentations to different audiences on diversity and DEI training and intercultural training. We've got one lady who delivers it to elementary schools. We've got somebody else who delivers it to businesses, and we've got somebody who delivers it to community groups and post-secondary institutions. And their presentations can be eye-opening, obviously tailored and geared towards specific audiences, but just the understanding that everybody will have these biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious. You're always wary or skeptical, or you may not even be aware that you're doing it, but they are there. And I think a big part of it is just the education, just to have everybody have that opportunity to just have their eyes opened a little bit, to be more respectful and to be more appreciative of the differences between people. And that's a difficult step for a lot of people. People will always say, well, I'm not racist, I'm not this, but they may not be aware of some of their behaviors or some of their language and how that is impacting others. And it may not be coming from a deep place, it's not coming from a place of hatred or anger, but just lack of awareness. And I think just trying to open everybody's eyes a little bit to be more in the moment and aware of who you're with at any given time and what is basic human decency and courtesy towards others.
So if you were to make a presentation for youth, whatever players, hockey, basketball, soccer, besides being in the moment, what else would you include in your presentation?
That's a difficult one. We're actually hoping to put a presentation on for coaches of minor sports sometime this spring. We've done presentations to organizations, so whether it's minor hockey, baseball, whatever. But I think part of the key is the coaches, the dozens and hundreds of coaches who are soccer, baseball, who may not receive this training and may not be aware of it. So the education is a big part. I think it's hard to tailor something for a group depending what that group is. So if you're looking at a school team that it was 100% white, 100% Canadian, perhaps they do need it to be more aware of the idea of inclusivity. If you're looking at a team that has got a handful of players from different countries who have come to Canada over the past number of years, finding out where they're from, what their practices, what their beliefs, how they want to be addressed, what they want to be called, how their interaction is going. I think rather than an instructional sort of thing, you just sort of want to have enough to start a dialogue, a conversation. And at the end of it, hopefully everybody would be on the same page with the same level of appreciation for others, regardless as to where they're from, what culture they're from, what country they're from, what they believe in. And for a lot of kids, that can be a little bit difficult, especially in a more competitive environment like sports. As they get older, wins become more important. Playing for titles and championships become the driving force of that. And recognizing that your team may need that kid from China who's a great skater. Your team may need that girl from the Middle East who is a great midfielder. And just being aware that they're people first. They're just like you, they're just like me, and they're playing a sport, and that's supposed to bring everybody together. And I think just try to avoid those flashpoints where you are going to find people who will strike out from time to time, verbally or through action or inaction, and just try to make them aware of that and how that's being perceived by the athletes and by everybody involved with the sport.
Just last year, during the Spud tournament, black goaltender from Halifax was called the N-word.
Yep.
Here on this island. What would you say if you were the coach? On either team.
Yeah, that was shocking. I think there's absolutely no room for it. I think
that's the easy answer.
That would be the easy answer. I would think.
Let's hear the hard one.
Myself as a coach, there'd be a zero tolerance policy for something like that. So the player, regardless as what their value to the team might be, I think there should be just a clear understanding that, society as a whole largely doesn't accept that sort of behavior, that sort of language, and it wouldn't be tolerated in, a minor sports tournament either. I would think I would have no problem with that, even if it's your star player, if it's the goalie who's giving you 5 shutouts, if it's the point guard who scores 20 points a game. It's just not an acceptable practice. The fact that situation was drawn out to such an extent before anybody took action, I think reflects badly on the minor associations involved. I would think if I was the coach of the kid who this happened to, I would give that kid every support that he needs. I would, certainly not tell him just to, turn the other cheek and walk away. It's something that should be called out and should be confronted. And I would applaud any kid who is brave enough to come forward, whether it's the kid who is the direct victim of it or whether it's one of their teammates. And I've seen both happen before, and just my pride and appreciation, the fact that you will have 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds who will make that stand, points towards a better world on the horizon, I think. But in terms of what we see, it's not something that should be tolerated. With some of our clients, we do get feedback like that, not only through sports, but through youth activities and through school. And each claim is taken seriously and investigated as thoroughly as possible to determine what the true nature of the incident is. We do have a few cases where, with a number of underlying factors, we'll have clients who will sometimes cite a racist example, but more often than not, they're having other issues, and they're just saying that I'm being treated this way because of my race, when in actuality they may have skipped class for 3 weeks, or they may have skipped practice for a week or something like that. So it's not directly a race thing. It's sometimes more the individual. But yeah, every claim that comes our way, we look at carefully. We talk with schools, we talk with teachers, and luckily they're few and far between. But when they do come up, whether in the context of sports or just in the context of teenagers, it is taken very seriously by us and all involved.
That's what you would have done if it would have happened.
Yes.
Let's look at the prevention.
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of slideshows and presentations we can do.
Yep.
But what else are you doing?
I think ground rules should be set amongst the team on day one. This is what is acceptable and this is what isn't. Unfortunately, many of those things may just fall to being on time for practices, being on this, when you should be thinking bigger picture. Like, you're not thinking this sort of language, this sort of behavior. You're more concerned with overall team cohesion rather than thinking, sportsmanship. And this, so I think ensuring that everybody involved in minor sport, whether it's through an association or through a school, is informed by the coach and the people in charge that this is a privileged play and you must treat it as such, and any behavior outside what is acceptable to the sport, to the school, to the community, to the association, just will not be tolerated. I think, and I hate to sound like that old guy, but I think with what a lot of kids experience and having such access to everything online, whether it's TikTok videos, whether it's music or whatever, and they may hear language that they might not be able to put in the full context that somebody who is more familiar with what society was like previously. So they're hearing things in songs and perhaps not fully recognizing, the power of words. And, so I think that's a larger conversation for families, for educators, I think. But it's just cultivating the culture within a team that, they're there to play the sport. They're there to play the sport to the best of their ability. And there's certain behaviors outside of the sport that just shouldn't be part of it. And making sure that they're aware of the punitive nature of what can happen if these rules are violated. And before anything larger comes of it, because you wouldn't want an incident where you've got something like what happened in hockey happening in a school basketball tournament. That could just blow up the entire season for the team. It's much higher than just that individual at any given time. It has an impact on the entire sport, and that's a big responsibility for kids, I think, to handle. But I think trying to stop something like that before it comes. Like I said, I think with most youth growing up in such culturally diverse communities and going to such culturally diverse schools, that they may not even see it anymore. So if they are being pushed in a certain way where they are becoming the flashpoint for some sort of racist confrontation, that it may just be the heat of the moment and not coming from that deep place of anger and hatred that so many people had for years. But at the same time, it should never be tolerated or excused. So just understanding that the culture of the team is this. And I think it's up for many of the coaches to set that example and address things there and now before anything reaches any sort of point of escalation.
And finally, when we look at sport for all,
Yep.
What else are we adding to this conversation from your chair?
We hope to work with anywhere from 8 to 10 to 12 minor sports associations in the coming months through the spring and summer to introduce sports to newcomer and immigrant youth. So, a lot of sports that they either haven't played before or not that familiar with. We'll be working with the appropriate coaches, the appropriate resources to make sure that they get a full experience and knowledge of a particular sport or activity, and to try to grow it. And from the hard work end, where we're looking at the research and the findings and stuff like that, we'd be working with our national partners to continuing the education awareness aspect of the changing population of both the country and the province, and again, just making sure that everybody is respectful and appreciative of the individual, regardless as to who they are or where they're from. That if you're playing a sport and you've got somebody in your team who can get you those 20 points per game, who can give you that shutout, who can dominate the midfield, that's a benefit, that's a bonus, and it doesn't matter who they are or where they came from. That's a team kind of thing. So it's just building that cohesion, I think.
Let's say right now you have an appointment with a youth sports player.
Yep.
And they don't know a lick about the island.
Yep.
What is your warning to them?
After
the greeting, of course.
After the greeting, yeah.
What's your warning?
If they're looking to get into sports, we try to find what they've played before, what they would like to play. We try to foster that safe environment they can be part of. If we've got somebody and they're convinced that their child is the next Messi, we will work closely with soccer P.E.I. to determine if that is the case. If we've got somebody in there, they're the next Ovechkin, okay, we'll work with hockey P.E.I. to make that a situation. But I don't think we issue warnings as such, but we are there to offer that support if there are ongoing issues. If somebody does go into a minor program and they find that their son or daughter isn't getting the playing time, their son and daughter isn't understanding what the coach is asking for, if they're not understanding the culture around a sport, then we can offer those supports. We can help build some bridges. If there's additional services we can provide to make sure that somebody is able to ease into a new sport or activity as seamlessly as possible, we'll do that too. So.
Well, Todd, thank you very much for this conversation.
My pleasure.
It's been very useful
and
helpful. And folks, if you're looking to reach out, what number can they call?
You can find our website at www.irsapei.ca or reach out to me individually anytime at Todd, Todd, @irsapei.ca.
Thank you very much, Todd.
My pleasure.